Yesterday, Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi lamented the fact that load shedding was causing crime to increase in the gruesome aftermath of the discovery of the bodies of two little boys in Soweto. Each day, the country documents a new damaging impact caused by daily rolling blackouts. Now the Revenue Service, Sars, also records the financial harm the power cuts are wreaking on the business of tax collection. Sars Commissioner Kieswetter told Parliament this week persistent power cuts have robbed the fiscus of up to 60 billion rand in taxes. He and his team were presenting their annual performance plan. Commissioner, good evening and welcome to Full View. 60 billion rand is a big number. How specifically is load shedding causing this loss?
Very directly, Iman. So we draw on the data that is provided by the CSIR, who report that we've had unserved energy or a loss of generation of about 6,400 gigawatt hours. I think the first point to note there is that's 260% up from the prior year. It's a huge impact. And that impact translates directly into the economy. And the CSIR, they report that to be around the order of 560 billion rand. Now, if you take just a very straight line extrapolation of a GDP to tax ratio of 25%, you can see that about 25% of that, a quarter of that, can potentially be a tax contribution. That tells you it's about 150 billion at the top end. So when we say 60 billion, it's a fairly conservative number, and we are clearly still modeling the full impact of that. But at 60 billion, as you say, that's a huge number. And so the impact on the fiscus is very material. We also then balance the loss of generation with a new subsector that's emerging, which has a positive knock-on effect, which I don't think was necessarily intended, which is accelerating the introduction into renewable. So, for example, last year, we saw a significant growth year on year, about 73% year on year growth in terms of the importation of solar panels just by the top 10 importers, totaling a value of 3.8 billion rand. In terms of static converters, that also the top 10 importers reported over 600% growth in that, a value of 5.1 billion, and a further 7.8 billion spent on just lithium-ion batteries from the top 10 importers, and that is 240% up last year. Yeah. Now, what that does, of course, it replenishes some of the tax loss and also begins to seed some economic activities. There may be a short-term impact on VAT because capital goods that are imported are zero rated for VAT, and we know that there is therefore a lag effect. But in the future, when those things come into production, then there will be VAT on the consumption thereof. So there's a very direct correlation between what happens in the electricity production, knock-on effect into what happens in the factories and other businesses, and then a further knock-on effect to growth in the economy, and lastly, into the fiscus. So our 60 billion we consider to be a fairly conservative number based on the information we draw on.
Let's talk about revenue and the potential of between 200 and 300 billion rand uncollected because of non-compliance or not everyone registering their taxable activities. Why do you think this is, Commissioner? Could part of the reason be that people see the corruption, the wastage of their taxes and want to keep that money out of government's hands?
Absolutely, there is a link between the confidence that the society, and particularly the taxpaying society, have in the entire system, and also the extent to which those who perpetrate crime are brought to book or not brought to book. And so when members of the public see wastage, when they see corruption, when they see crime and criminals not being held to account, they begin, even honest people, begin to feel morally justified to fiddle with their taxes. That is besides the direct impact of the illicit and criminal activity economy, where those activities aren't even registered because they are below the radar. We have seen the illicit tobacco and cigarette trade, the illicit gold industry, the illicit clothing industry. We have sadly seen a proliferation of how this has embedded itself in our economy, and therefore the knock-on effect of that is not only financial, it also destroys the social fiber and the social contract ultimately between government and the public.
I want to go to this next question, only because of the limited time, and I'll get, if there's time, I'll get back to some of the housekeeping issues and what you told Parliament this week. But Commissioner, on the story that has sucked up a lot of our attention, and that's the Thabo Bester story, questions asked in Parliament about lifestyle audits being conducted by G4S on its employees following the revelation that one of the suspects in the case, it was a warder who earned less than 20,000 Rand, how he was able to afford a luxury vehicle and an apparently moneyed lifestyle. How does SARS get involved? Ostensibly, these individuals would not have declared their income, underpaying taxes. Just take us into how that gets built.
Of course, and so let me deal with this at a matter of principle. So SARS regularly receives tip-offs, but also through our own risk analysis using third-party data and machine learning algorithms, we're able to detect oddities in the extent to which people disclose the economic activities and or disclose it for tax purposes, and what we see their lifestyle exhibits as. So, for example, we have done extensive audits on people who have luxury cars that doesn't match the income that they declare. We've done lifestyle audits that tries to interpolate or connect people who own properties, second properties, for example. We also started focusing on luxury goods because a lot of the money laundering and a lot of the illicit expenditure comes from proceeds of crime or ill-gotten gains. And so SARS continuously tries to expand and to increase its access to data, and then uses machine learning and artificial intelligence to try and collect and connect those dots. And we have begun to see significant success, but we'd be the first to say we have a long way to go. This is really an area where we have a lot of catch-up to do, and that is our focus, Iman.
So would it be like red flagged? Would you get I mean, this is, I'm asking from a point of ignorance of how the systems work. Like, would something ping in the system? And the reason I ask, and it circles back to the question of trust, in government spending our money well. For example, you have that story around revelations, Andre de Ruyter and Eskom, saying that there were ministers in the cabinet that were benefiting, ministers who might have looted Eskom. Are you, as SARS, able to independently, go ahead and look into their financial affairs and see if there's, if there are excesses of living that don't correlate to the money that they earn?
SARS acts independent of any other government agencies. We draw on disclosures made by taxpayers, but we also draw on other sources of structured and unstructured information in society. So, for example, we listened to the Zondo report when the Zondo Commission engagements when that happened. And when we suspect that there is some telltale or bit of crumbs that are thrown there, we have the ability to follow that up and to try and establish what the facts are. And based on the facts, we can profile a taxpayer and come in. So, for example, from state capture, just state capture-related cases, we reported a total of 46 audits that we conducted last year. 70, that's lifestyle audits, 78 criminal investigations, and 22 of those cases were completed to the value of R500 million. We also said, if we just take broadly the over 300 criminal preliminary investigations and 413 tax inquiries we've conducted, We have raised assessments to the value of 4 billion rand and have recovered revenue of almost 4 billion rand as well. We currently have 42 active tax projects that are being conducted to the value of 2 billion rand. So none of these were necessarily declared by taxpayers, but it is from what taxpayers, what becomes publicly known, either through media reports, through investigative journalism, or through commissions of inquiry. SARS tries to gather all bits and bytes of data to construct profiles of taxpayers, those who are registered and those who are not registered, so including financial assets that taxpayers may have overseas. So
directly relating to the Andre de Ruyter matter then, I mean, are you looking as SARS independently, because this is tantamount to whistleblowing, some might say, these ministers that he's talking about, making, lots of money, looting the coffers of Eskom?
We follow up every single event, regardless of who the source is. We follow it up, and Iman, the assurance I want to give South Africans is SARS operates without prejudice, without fear, without favor, regardless of what station in life you may think you occupy. So whether you are a gogo in the township, a cabinet minister, the president of South Africa, the commissioner of SARS, we all are subject to the tax laws of South Africa.
SARS Commissioner Edward Kieswetter, thank you very much for your time this afternoon, this evening. We appreciate it. He is the SARS Commissioner, talking to us there about their address to Parliament earlier this week, looking at the 60 billion rand hole that's left through the impact of load shedding, amongst a range of issues.